Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Cinema Studs, the high school student-led podcast where we interview other high school students and experts about the movies you love. We're your hosts.
I'm Kevin Zano.
And I'm Sam Rooker. Today on the show we have comic book lover Grizel Plata. Woo!
Yay!
Yeah! Kevin, why don't you tell the people what this month's movie theme is?
This month's theme is superhero movies.
Yes, it is. Today's film is our first full episode, because the film we are going to be reviewing has just come out in theaters. That film is Shazam, and apparently there's an exclamation point at the end. I looked at the poster, and I don't know why it's there, but it is. So, what was you guys' first introduction to Shazam? I've read a few comics, I know who the character is, but I haven't really been introduced fully to him. What about you, Grizel?
I was introduced to him about 2 years ago when I first read his 2013, I believe, comic book adaptation for the New 52.
Excellent run, some great art and a great story in terms of the
Loved
different
it.
characters. Some people have mixed opinions and they think Rebirth is better, but I'm gonna have to say New 52 is good.
Once I finished reading the first comic book adaptation, the newest one anyway, I went back in time. I went to see some earlier comic book adaptations, and I did like the post-crisis version of Billy Batson. Sorry.
Kevin's not in the comic book stuff as much as us, but what was your opinion?
So basically, I'm not really into comic books that much, but I was introduced to it because there was a bunch of trailers coming out from Comic-Con, and they just happened to release the trailer for Shazam. And when I saw the commercial, I just thought it was interesting for DC to take a lighthearted turn of events in terms of their dark DC universe, and I wasn't looking forward to it, but when I heard about the good reviews, I wanted to see it.
So I'm going to be 100% honest before we go any further. This podcast episode is going to be chock full of spoilers. Go no further if you want no spoilers. If you want to keep listening and want to hear our opinions on the film and have it chock full of spoilers, keep on listening because that's what we're going to do. So, before we start, I'd like to talk about something, and that's the DCEU. It's hated by most, loved by a few, and most people when we see it being the Snyderverse. I think this could be the savior of the DCU. I really do. They're introducing new concepts like the idea of magic. Most of the DC universe has wanted to do the different godlike characters and look at the cosmic sides of things. Almost introducing Darkseid with Justice League and Green Lantern that was cut from the eventual end of the film. But magic brings so many lighthearted adventures and interesting ideas in, like, we'll explain later, Mr. Mind, the caterpillar that's a genius.
I love Mr. Mind.
Yeah, I love Mr. Mind too. He's crazy. What about you, Grizel? What do you think DC has the potentiality for with Shazam for the future of its DCU?
Well, of course, with the introduction of magic, it's great to have other plot points other than, aliens and normal people. Magic is just another side of that coin with the Zatanna or Constantine, another of my favorite characters in the whole DC universe.
Yeah, what do you think, Kevin?
I believe it gets fixed with Shazam is because of how different it is in terms of tone in comparison to the other DC films. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why Marvel is thriving right now is they just don't rely on one specific tone. They do all different types of genres and tones in terms of their films, and I think this is a big step up for DC.
Yeah, there are some great characters that magic opens it up to. It allows the films to be fun and not be worried about being so grounded and gritty. That's part of why I love Doctor Strange as a film and the MCU is it brings in new concepts, new ideas, the idea of magic and studying magic and becoming a master of the mystic arts. It's just such a great concept, and I think it works really well in the MCU. I also think that bringing in new and interesting directors really helps with this. They did that back with Christopher Nolan, and they were doing it with Snyder with his films like Watchmen and maybe a little bit of Batman vs. Superman. The MCU's mastered this with bringing in what do you know? Do you know how to pronounce it?
Taika Moon.
I'm sorry, I suck at names, but they remembered it.
Yeah.
And Jon Favreau. I think that that's the main key to making these films do well. Find an audience to connect with for the films like this film, and bring in new and interesting upcoming directors to make the films interesting. So the way our podcast works is we have a round table conversation where we hit some major plot points and we talk about the things we liked and the things we didn't along the way. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what does a child/teen's perspective add to the way the film is told? Now, I could connect with this sometimes, as every kid can, by feeling like they were unwanted sometime or feeling like they were cast out from society. And also, I could connect with the different references there were. Like, Billy Batson as Shazam started flossing, which was kind of weird and kind of awkward.
Yeah.
They talk about different references to comic books, movies, TV. They make a Game of Thrones reference. Mm-hmm. It's pretty interesting. What do you think about it, Griselle? What does this child's perspective add to the film?
Well, when an adult plays a superhero, it's like, as I'm quoting from Zachary Levi, is that when an adult is forced to become a superhero, it's like they already have so many other giant responsibilities. It's like, oh my god, I have to be the superhero now. Mm-hmm. But for Billy Batson, it's like everyone's childhood dream to have superpowers and just, go flying over the city. And
what were you going to say, Kevin?
I just want to say that it's not as big as for representation as maybe a woman in Wonder Woman or a black person in Black Panther, but it's different to see like a superhero story being revolved around a kid, and I think that's what caused attraction toward this film, and that adds a lot of lighthearted aspects to it and makes us understand the characters more because we were all kids, and it's just a universal idea, I think.
Let's go ahead and talk about representation a little bit. This film has a lot of big shoes to fill. Captain Marvel just came out the month before, where it was a female-led superhero film with lots of female lead actors, and actresses rather. And I don't think the representation was as strong here in terms of different races that they involved. They were racially complex in the casting that they did. But I think that it's really just another white guy playing the main superhero. And I think that there could have been some more representation in a few places. What do you guys think?
Here's the thing about talking about just another white superhero. You could change his gender, or you could even, stretch it and maybe even change his race. But you can't satisfy one end of each straw. Like, one wants representation, but one wants, another group of people wants to have it to be comic accurate. You can't satisfy both those people. So you gotta either compromise or, just stick to one end.
What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I agree with that statement because I don't think you should have to change something just for it to be, accepted by two different sides, but rather just adding on to that with more diverse characters to the storyline, and I think that's where it's strong in terms of diversity. I mean, maybe it's not revolved around, maybe Shazam isn't a woman or anything, but I think just the background characters being, racially diverse is something to be proud of, in my opinion.
I'd have to agree, but I'd also like to say that the MCU has a lot more ability to take liberties with this. They hadn't had any films that had established a precedent for what these characters were like. We all know who Batman is, we know who Wonder Woman is, and we know who Superman is. Before Jon Favreau's Iron Man in, I think it was 2001, 2003 maybe, no one had known who Iron Man was. The idea of changing characters that are already established is something that a lot of people have backlash to. What was your perspective on the whole J.K. Rowling thing, Griselle?
Oh, wow. It's really interesting that she just decides, hey, let's go back into my books, even though I've established these characters that they were white or something, and just forget that all that happened, and now they're black.
What do you think, Kevin?
I don't think you should change it just for it to be accepted by other types of communities and groups. I think you should just keep it the way it is, and unless you do it just for some type of token character or something, but it doesn't add anything to representation or the story, it just feels unnecessary.
I'd have to agree with that. Yeah, there's been a lot of backlash. The whole Dumbledore being gay thing was already a theory, but there's so many other things like making Hermione black that I feel are fine. So one of the things that you just can't ignore about this film is the performance from Zachary Levi. He played Shazam. I thought he and his counterpart, who played Billy Batson, I can get that up real quick, did an amazing job. They both played off each other and off the other actors, and I think that they should get huge props for what they did. Asher Angel played Billy Batson. What do you guys think of his performance? Well, let's start with you, Kevin.
I mean, first off, I want to start off with Zachary Levi. I think he personally killed it as this type of like man-child superhero, and like I just think it really adds his performance just adds a lot of like comedy and humor and heart to the film, and it's just nice to see like a different perspective and a different like type of view, like a child's view through an adult's type of eyes, and that's just something that's different and unique, in my opinion.
What do you think, Grizel?
I think he nailed it when it came to once he finally got his powers. He started acting all arrogant and showing them off. I really loved his performance. He really showed the side that once a child gets superpowers, what do? Do you immediately start fighting crime, or do you want to show those powers off and mess around a little bit? Mm-hmm. I think he totally nailed that. Along with Asher Angel, I think.
Yeah, that's the name.
He also killed it when it came to the relationship between Billy and his foster siblings. Yeah, he wasn't the best in the beginning of the film, but you really feel that connection between the siblings later on in the film. Most of the family bonding actually happens with Billy Batson instead of Shazam. Mm-hmm. And I really liked both their performances.
I thought there wasn't really a performance that I could pinpoint in this film and say, that's not a good performance. Every performance was well done, but this one really did just stand out to me. He was embodying the character, same thing I can't say for some of the MCU actors. He's really just becoming this persona and this character. On his Instagram the other day, I saw a picture of a little girl coming up and hugging him and saying, Shazam, Shazam.
Yeah, I've seen that one where he posted a piece of fan art that this little girl made, and later on this little girl just comes up to and hugs him.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think it might have been a Comic-Con, but it was really well done, and I think he did a great performance, or he gave a great performance.
And even when he's not in interviews, he does show a lot of passion for this character.
Yeah, he does. He really does. This has one of the boldest openings for a film, in my opinion. It opens, we're going to explain a little bit of the timeline of the film and how it works. This film opens with Dr. Savannah, who is played by Mark Strong, and he's a little kid driving through the countryside with his father and his brother. And as they're driving, he gets sucked into this magical, I think it's a hall of some sort.
Oh, I can't even remember.
It's got some comic book name. I don't remember what it is.
The Rock of Eternity.
The Rock of Eternity. And it's where the Council of Elders, I think that's what it called.
Yeah, the Council of Elders.
And they all had the Shazam powers that they'd given away. But he is transported there where, I forget the name of the wizard, and it does. I don't know.
It's Shazam. It's based.
I know the wizard's the comic book name and the movie name, but I don't remember the actor who plays him. I think it's Digimon. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he tells Mark Strong's character that he has the ability to become Shazam if he's pure and he's worthy, and the 7 deadly sins are introduced in this scene. I think introducing the 7 deadly sins in this way is a pretty creative idea. They're not super comic book accurate, they're pretty close. Mm-hmm. In the comic books, they're a little bit more like the Sinister Six, where they're a team of supervillains, I think, from some sort.
Well, actually, they're still, in the original comics, they're still trapped in rock. Mm-hmm. They just go under a different name. The 7 enemies of man, that's what they were originally called, and and lust wasn't actually a part of them.
Mm-hmm. And you get the 7 deadly sins, but I'm a little bit disappointed by their character design. They're not as unique and individualized as they are in the comic books.
Yeah.
Each one is very different in their design in the comic books. You have interesting color palettes and designs, but you don't get that in the film. What do you think of their portrayal in the film, Grizel?
Yeah, I do agree with that. Of course, early in the comics, they did have a bit of a goofy design. Mm-hmm. Of course. I don't really know if it's them actually trapped behind the rock, or it's just like a mask to cover what they actually look like. Mm-hmm. But I do agree with the point that they do kind of look similar, and you can't really tell them apart.
Yeah, and let's keep going in terms of what the film is about while we're at it. So, the film is described on Rotten Tomatoes, where it has a score of 91 on the tomato meter and an 89% audience rating, which at the end, we're going to do some film recommendations for films we've watched recently, and we're going to give our personal audience score for Shazam. But the description is, we all have superheroes inside us. It just takes a bit of magic to bring it out. In Billy Batson's case, by shouting out one word, Shazam, this streetwise 14-year-old foster kid can turn into the grown-up superhero, Shazam. I think that's a pretty reasonable description, but the film really does follow the relationship between Shazam and Dr. Sivana. You get this interesting parallel because Sivana feels like he's always had a father, but he never feels like the father's accepted him. Mm-hmm. And I think from what I remember that's fairly close to the comics, but Shazam always feels like there's a parent out there, and if he finds his mom, who's his parent he knows about, that she'd accept him. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting parallel because they're queer opposites of each other. And how do you guys think that develops a dynamic between the two characters? Do you have anything to say on this, Kevin?
I think it adds a unique perspective to both characters. Like, you see them struggling with different things, like Dr. Savani trying to get acceptance from his father, Billy Batson trying to find his mother, and it's just different, in my opinion, to see. I mean, they're both struggling with something, and that just adds, like, in a way, layers to their characters, and it just sets a comparison between the two.
Yeah, I'd agree. What do you think, Rizal?
Well, another difference between the two characters is, you know, the big trope of the chosen one? Mm-hmm. I do like how they introduced Savannah in the beginning. Like, he could have been the chosen one, but he wasn't. Mm-hmm. He was just, once the wizard Shazam decided, no, you're not worth it, you're not good enough to be the chosen one, he just throws him out, and I guess that gives you more a reason to not like the wizard so much, to realize that his intentions may not be the best.
The other interesting comparison with the seven deadly sins is we see throughout this film that each of the sins is represented in the way humans act. Mm-hmm. And you start to understand that maybe nobody's worthy of this. Maybe it's the person who is good enough and has a good enough heart to wield it. Some other things we should talk about. So, how can these villains be introduced later on? In the end of the film, we see Dr. Savannah in the post-credits scene talking to Mr. Mind, and then the sins are banished back into the stone once they get back to the Rock of Eternity. How do you guys think they can be introduced later on? How about you, Grizel?
I actually don't think they should be introduced later on.
Really? Why is that?
Because the reason why Billy was kind of chosen in this movie was because the Wizard Shazam was kind of out of time, out of options. Mm-hmm. And Billy Batson really wasn't that good of a kid in the beginning. So trying to get a child that's pure of heart because the Wizard Shazam is running out of time. Mm-hmm. The seven deadly sins already have their champion. Mm-hmm. The Wizard Shazam's powers are dwindling, so he needs a successor to take his powers and gather the seven deadly sins back up.
So another thing that I would like to talk about with that is we know that they're probably going to bring them in later on. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to see what they do with Mr. Mind. I'm going to look up the real definition, but what do you think? Who is Mr. Mind in the comics, Grizel? I know you've read some of him. What do you think about him?
Well, we all know that a lot of people know that Mr. Mind in the beginning was really, really just this an alien worm, mind-controlling alien worm from the planet Venus, who his original design was very, very goofy looking. Yeah. He was just like a caterpillar with that goofy smile. But it's kind of weird how they went, since the original comics were posted like around the World War II area, they kind of went into, made Mr. Mind actually, how can I say
they made it more realistic?
More of, like... Can I say the N-word? Like Nazi. Nazi.
You can say Nazi.
I don't know if I can.
Just say.
Sorry, I realized that's bad. But yeah, it's kind of weird that DC made him actually more in the shape of a Nazi, if anything else. Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of comic books take inspiration from the words that they're being drawn in and worked through. Now, Kevin, I know you don't know that much about this character, but what did you think seeing that end credit scene as a film lover? Do you think it has bigger implications later on? And did you like it?
Well, first off, I'm gonna go off and say that I didn't understand any of what happened in the end credit scene. I mean, I know something ambiguous happened during the end credit scene, but I also know that something like bad's gonna happen, and possibly, well, yeah, the sequel's already in development, so yeah.
I have an alternate version of this end credit scene that I wish they used, and it involves Black Adam. Black Adam is an awesome character in the comic books. He's when you think of antagonists for Shazam, he's the immediate one that I think of whenever I think about the character. They've cast The Rock as Black Adam, which I think is an amazing idea, and I think it could have great results. But I would have had a Black Adam end credit scene. Maybe see him walking into the Rock of Eternity, and don't pan to his face yet. Have him walk down that long hallway and sit on the throne in sit on one of the thrones in the Rock of Eternity, and sigh or something like that. Introduce him in a sinister way. Mr. Mind detracts from the film a little bit, in opinion.
Yeah.
They could have used a different... there's other interpretations of the character in more recent comic books that have him more like a giant nasty slug or all kinds of weird things. Introduce him in a different way. It feels uncanny and weird, and I don't like it. What did you think of using it?
Well, I also agree that they should have they did hint of Black Adam's existence earlier in the film when the wizard Shazam was explaining a little bit to Billy with the whole magic dust thing. And I do agree that they should have, since they're making a Black Adam movie, they should introduce him in the end credits scene. And I do agree with Mr. Mind that sharing it, introducing him now will kind of people aren't going to really take him seriously since he's like a small tiny worm with a little microphone that translates his his thoughts into words. And I do love Mr. Mind as a character.
What were you about to say, Kevin?
It was actually a question, but what exactly is Mr. Mind?
He's a creature from the planet Venus.
Yeah.
I have the specific type of creature he is. I don't know what it is.
Wait, so it's not a person?
No,
It is not a person.
Mr. Mind is the little caterpillar looking.
It's literally a killer caterpillar. That's why I think it's a bad idea. It's going to detract from this whole universe.
Exactly.
Is there anything else that we'd like to talk about here? Let's start to get into our wrap up. Shazam is a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, you need to. It's carrying around a 91% on the tomato meter. It's got an 89 as an audience score. What would you guys give this film on the tomato meter? Let's start with you, Kevin.
Well, probably the highest film I would give a tomato meter for a superhero movie is The Dark Knight, and that'd probably be I don't know, it'd just be really high. But for Shazam, it'd probably be in the 80s, somewhere in the 80s, because I really enjoyed it. I just think it's something new. Well, not new per se, but just something more lighthearted than most superheroes right now.
Yeah, what about you, Grizel?
Even though I had a bit of a bias for Billy Batson for a long time, and I was thinking, okay, he flossed, that's kind of awkward, but I still love him. And after watching this movie, there's a few things that were kind of, of course they're not going to be comic accurate. That it's kind of, if they're going to be comic accurate, just read the comics, basically. But I did have a few biases and a few headcanons that they were going to do for the movie, but overall, I really did enjoy the movie. It made me feel giddy, and so I kept bouncing my leg while watching it. So I'd give it an 89.
An 89. I feel the same way. It got me reignited and re-excited for this DCU. The Joker film's coming around later this year. I'm really excited for that and the implications it brings. And I think that it's a great film and that people need to go see more of it because it didn't have that strong a box office opening as it could have. Let's go into favorites and recent watches. So we're going to start doing a segment where we talk about our favorite scene from the film, and we're going to start talking about movies we've seen recently that we'd like to recommend. My favorite scene in the entire film has to be in the end when Shazam and his foster siblings touch the Shazam, what is it? It's a staff?
It's a staff.
It's a staff. And his foster siblings get the powers of Shazam. They get different versions of the powers, like specific ones, like Freddie Freeman can fly and one can shoot electricity.
And Darla can, Eugene can manipulate electricity. Darla can run super fast. Pedro is super strong. And Mary, I think, just had,
She might have all of them.
Yeah, I think
Maybe. We'll have to figure out what it is, but I love that scene. It got me giddy and excited to see what a sequel could have. But it does overstay its welcome.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's my big complaint with this movie, is that it overstays its welcome sometimes. In places where it should have maybe backed off a little bit. It should have said, hey, we've showed this. Let's add something interesting at the end to top it off. What was your favorite scene, Grizel?
Well, the training scene was a good scene, but there's this part in the trailers that I think a lot of people have seen where Billy Batson just after meeting his mother, his biological mother, he gets a call from Savannah that he has his siblings. He has his siblings and he can kill them and whatever. But I know it's already been shown in the trailers, and it's my fault for spoiling myself early. But I do love the scene where he just jumps off the building and yells his magical word, Shazam. I think that scene just stuck with me, and I don't know, it just brought shivers down my spine.
What was your favorite scene, Kevin?
My favorite scene would have to be like the montage scene where they're just like messing around with Shazam's powers for the first time, and it was just a really fun scene, and with Queen in the background of it added a lot of enjoyment for me.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. Let's move on to recent watches. This is a segment we're going to start doing where we recommend movies that we've seen recently. So you guys have seen some movies. Do you have an idea of what you've seen recently? Can you explain a little bit about it?
Well, last film I saw was this movie called Unicorn Store on Netflix, and it happens to be Brie Larson's directorial debut, and it's a fine film to watch if you're looking for something and if you're just bored.
Sounds like you're a little critical of the film, Kevin. What did you think?
But it's something bad about the film. It just could have been better, but I think it's still a fun watch. And the other film I would like to mention is Jordan Peele's Us, which in my opinion is one of the best horror films of the decade so far, and it's... Okay, let me see that again. And my other film is Us, which, in my opinion, kind of blew me away because I was not expecting for Jordan Peele to follow up Get Out with this, and basically it... Okay. My next film is Us, Jordan Peele's directorial debut, and in my opinion, this is one of the best horror films in recent years. It's a different film about a family and their doppelgangers following them, and it's just that unique concept with Jordan Peele's writing and his use of dread and terror in the film. It just adds a different type of experience, in my opinion, and I think if you haven't watched it, then you should watch it.
What about you, Grizel?
Well, I haven't really been watching a lot of movies lately because I've been getting into animation. Well, I've always been into animation for a while, but something that gets me a little upset is that the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I don't think that many people actually went to see it.
Yeah.
And it's such a great movie. Even though it's probably not in the cinema anymore, but it was a great movie with its animation was great with of course it was shot on 2x2s, but then there was ones where it was kind of choppy, but I think that was great. That added a character into the movie. I maybe don't recommend it for people who get dizzy real easily.
Or have epilepsy.
No, don't even try to.
Don't even try. But I also really love the music in it. Yeah. Like one of the scenes where the Prowler is one of the villains. I loved his theme, his music that played in the background. It gave so much emotion to the character.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I've seen a ton of memes about how well and how badly Spider-Verse performed. It won an Oscar, but it still didn't make back its budget that much. I saw a meme that said, when Spider-Verse isn't passing the billion mark, and it's Kingpin saying, it's not always about the money, Spider-Man. And it's all kinds of really great memes. But I saw a couple films recently. I saw a film with Liam Neeson called Rob Roy, where he's a Scottishman, I think, and it's him trying to support his clan. And there's also a film called The Mission about a mission. I think it's in India that's about to be shut down, and they try to fight for it. And that also has Liam Neeson, but it's also got Jeremy Irons and Robert De Niro, actually. And I think those are two really great watches, and if you haven't seen them, you need to. That's all from us here at Cinema Studs. Remember, we're your hosts, Sam Rooker
And Kevin Pisano, and our guest, Grizel
Plata.
And from everyone here at Cinema Studs, thanks for listening.